What is up, guys? 806 English here, and welcome back to another video. Alright guys, I know that I've been slacking a ton on this YouTube channel, and I am truly sorry about that. The next video, or later in the future, I'm going to start editing 2018's best moments. I know it's a little late for that, but I still want to get it out to you guys because there's some pretty awesome moments, and there's some really funny moments too that I really want to show you guys. Ice fishing video, I'm kind of having trouble with it because I kind of backed it up, because what I did is I got all the footage, put it on one thing so I could go back and edit it later. So I'm having trouble with that. So once I figure that situation out, the ice fishing video will be up for you guys. I may even just put up day 2 video first if it's long enough. If not, I'm probably gonna have to put it in with day 1, so you're gonna have to wait a little bit longer. But as you can tell by today's video, it's gonna be about crappie fishing. Now before we get into this video, I'm gonna be going up to Greenbelt this weekend probably, and hopefully we can find some bedding bass. If you follow me on Instagram, you probably would have seen my post of that crappie that I posted. I didn't catch it, but Papo caught it. He's been on this channel before. He actually caught it on a little bladed bait. So let's go ahead and talk about these bladed baits. Actually, we're just gonna go ahead and talk about them. So inside this box, I don't know if I've showed y'all this or done a review about them. I probably will in the future. If you haven't been subscribed to me and you haven't seen my New Mexico ice fishing trip vlog, I mentioned these guys because before my trip, they actually hit me up on Instagram and they said, would you like a 50% off discount code? I'm not being paid to say this at all, so this is not a sponsorship type of video. They just were kind enough to send me a discount code, and I was like, sure, I'll go ahead and check out your baits and use them and see what I think about them. They just hit me up randomly out of nowhere and gave me the discount code, so I thank you guys for that if you're watching. So go follow these guys, Untapped Fishing, on Instagram. So I'm going to go ahead and show you these colors. I like to use these colors when I know that the crappies, or I like to use bladed baits and stuff like this that I'm about to show you when I know that the crappies are chasing after minnows. So this is what they look like. The one that seemed to really work was probably a silver one. It imitated more of the forage a lot better, like the minnows and stuff that were swimming around. So yeah, I like to use bladed jigs for crappies when I know that there's a lot of minnows around and I know for a fact that they're chasing them. So that's one color. Here's like a little purple color. This one actually looks really good. I think we can catch something on that. This one looks good too. We got a little pink one. And this bronze one that I was telling you about, the one that Pop was using, looked exactly like this except it was silver. Another thing that I like to use too is jigging spoons. Here's a little jigging spoon that's a little white one. And then here's another one that looks like a little minnow. So jigging spoons are really good for crappies and stuff like that. I also love to use these for crappie as well. So this one imitates a minnow perfectly. As you can see right there, it's got a little treble hook and then it's got a little hook on top. So this bait works fairly well for crappie and stuff like that. So this is probably one of my favorite things to do for crappie, to use for crappie, and some others are probably like this. This is a baby bass color, like a little bluegill color. For those of you that don't know, crappie actually, whenever the bluegill spawn, they actually eat bluegill fries, so that's kind of good. Here's a little shad representation too, so this one will work really well for those crappie. So I have had very good luck with these for crappie, and those are probably one of my favorite things to use. Before we get into this next portion, as you can see, here's Kobe's new tank. If you haven't checked that video out, I'll also leave it linked down below. Why don't you go ahead and go check it out and give it a like. It's a little dirty already, as you can see, so I'm gonna have to clean this tank. Alright guys, so you can see here's another one of my tackle boxes. I call this tackle box mostly my crappie tackle box, but there's a few things in here for trout. As you can see, got mice tails there and right there, but for the most part this is filled with crappie stuff. I mean, you can use this stuff for trout too. So one of the things that gets really good luck is little minnow imitations like this. As you can see, this is like a, I can't remember what color this was. I like to do a double rig. I do top and bottom with a jig head, and I put 2 different colors. Like for example, if I was going to use these minnow type baits, I'd probably tie on this one and this one. You know, if I catch one fish, I'd keep fishing with the double rig and see what color they like better. Once I find out if they're hitting more of the purple or more of the blue, then I'll switch out the other color with the color they've been hitting on. So that's a really good way to find out if you're going to use artificial lures like jigs and stuff, like little crappie jigs. That's a really good way to find out kind of what color they really like. And one thing I like to do when fishing these is Let me pull out my spinning rod here. Whoops. Alright, so as you can see, here's the spinning rod, and the lines are right here. I'm going to talk about line, rod, and reel, and all that kind of good stuff here in a minute. So, one thing I like to do with those types of baits, like these little minnow type baits, is I like to throw them out and reel them in slowly and kind of give it a little pop, and then just reel them slowly and kind of give it a little pop. Another thing I like to do is whenever you're fishing it, stick your finger out like this, so whenever the line comes up this way, the line hits your finger, and it kind of makes it, it gives it a little bit of action, and reel it really, really slow, and let the line hit your finger like that, and just reel it slow, because when it's swimming, it gives it a little bit of action. Since it doesn't have a paddle tail, it gives it a lot of action, and I find that to do really, really well for those types of fish. Another thing I really, really like to fish with for crappie is a little tube jig. Now these little tube jigs, I usually just jig them. I don't really throw it out and retrieve. If I do, I probably throw it out, retrieve really slow, and give it nice little pops just like this, like the minnow. But I wouldn't really throw it out and kind of do my finger. I don't know why. I just feel like jigging these little tube jigs would works a lot better for me. The colors that I have, this one's made by Power Bait. You can find them at Walmart. They come out with different colors, and it's like a little chartreuse. And I switched out the tail for this one. They usually have like little power worms right here that comes with them. I switched out the tail because this is probably one of my favorite colors, the chartreuse with an orange tail. But if you get them in the package, they'll come like this, fully chartreuse with a chartreuse power worm on the bottom. So you can switch them out too. All you have to do is buy power worms and in the little packs, and then you can just switch out the tails on the little grubs. Another color that I like is this weird green chartreuse and maroon tube jig. This one works pretty good for crappie. And then here's a similar one, except it's blue, dark blue tip, and then a white, a little white skirt. And here's a baby blue with the white skirt. This one works really, really well for those crappie. Here's another one I forgot to mention. This one too, by Power Bait. This one's like a yellow with an orange tail. This one works really, really well. If you buy these, you can also take out this tail and put it on your other color if you do decide to get these, so that way you don't have to buy another pack of power worms or whatever. So here's another thing that I like to use for crappie. This one is like a little cricket style bait. I think this one's made by Big Bite Baits. I don't know if they sell them anymore. I think they do, but this one came in pre-rigged in a little pack. This little jig head's a little bit dirty, but these still work really, really well. What I like to do for these, this got a really, really big heavy weight. If I'm fishing deep water, I'm probably going to use these. So one thing I like to do with something like this is I just jig it. I wouldn't really reel it in too much since it's a lot heavier. I just kind of use it as like a little jigging bait, kind of like a vertical jig, like the jigging spoons that I showed you. I kind of just like drop it down and fish it at certain depths just to see where they're hanging out in the water column, and then I just jig it vertically like this, and hopefully I get a bite. So that's one thing I like to do with these cricket style baits since they're a little bit heavier. Alright, so there's one of these. It's like a tube jig, like a bass, like it's like a tube jig, except the body is not hollow, and it's got the same skirt, and it's got ribs. I don't know how well y'all can see that. Please focus. Focus. Man, why isn't it focusing? So I don't know if you could tell very well, but it's got ribs on there, as you can see, and it's got two different colors, like a chartreuse and like a green back or something like that. Then on the jig head, I got kind of like a natural like minnow color. It's like kind of blackish on top, and then it's got a white bottom right there. So this color works really, really well. I actually use this ice fishing in New Mexico, and you'll see that here pretty soon once I post that video. So yeah. One thing I like to do with these is the same thing with the tube jigs. I forgot to mention, but these work really, really well. Jig head size, I'm really not too sure about the jig head size. I forgot to tell you the truth, but it's not nothing really, really heavy. It's not too heavy, but it's also not too light. It's just perfect, so it works. So another thing that I like to do is fish marbo jigs, marabou jigs, whatever they're called. I call them marbo jigs. If you don't know what marbo jig looks like, they look like this. I actually custom made this one and this one too. I have different colors. This one's more of a like a I don't know, this isn't a marbo jig, because it doesn't have like a body like the others do. It's just a jig head and a skirt. I can't remember what those are called. They may be called marbo jigs, I'm not really too sure. Here's an orange one that I also made. It's kind of old and stuff like that. And here's another one that doesn't have a body, but it's a lot smaller. And this one too, this one, not a marbo jig, but it's just like a little jigging, it's like a little jigging type of bait. Those baits I usually like to jig it, or another thing I like to do is kind of just throw it out there as far as I can, or if I know where they're kind of just hanging out, just throw it out there and just kind of reel it slow and give it a nice little pop, and then just do the same thing over and over. You get slow, steady retrieve and just pop it and wait for them to bite. So that's one of the things that I really like to do for crappie. So the next thing we're going to get into is live bait, fishing with like minnows and stuff like that. Use like an Aberdeen type hook. I usually like to use Aberdeen type hooks like this, or just a regular bait holder hook. I don't really like to use minnows on a weight too much. I just let the weight of the minnow kind of just, you know, sink it down and let the minnow use itself as a weight. I usually don't put like a split shot above the minnow or anything. So I'll usually get those Aberdeen hooks, weightless rig it, and then just drop it straight down next to a log. And that's how I usually catch fish. Sometimes if I don't actually have hooks, like one time I didn't have hooks, I actually used a jig head and rigged the minnow, like nose hooked it on the jig head and just dropped it straight down. I usually like to do that, but for the most part I'll use a minnow weightless on an Aberdeen hook or regular bait holder hook. So honestly, the most effective way to catch crappie is by a minnow, but I like to catch them on lures for the most part because it's a little bit funner since you're jigging it and moving it, and I just think it's a lot funner to catch crappie off of a little lure. But if not, then I'll go to the most effective way, which is catching them off minnows. If you can't catch them off minnows, chances are they're not there or they're crazy, because crappie absolutely love minnows. Like, I can't tell you how much they love minnows. Like, you'll absolutely school them if you use minnows. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is rod, reel, and line. So as you can see here, I got my trout and crappie rod. I mostly use this for trout, but since I recently got it, it's for trout because I got it for the Utah trip. I used it over there and it worked really, really well. So I'm also going to use this for crappie. This is a 7-foot Shakespeare Micro Series, and this is a 7-foot? Yeah, I said 7 foot. And this is a light action rod. I like to use like a little 7-foot ultralight rod. Now for rods, I'd stick with an ultralight to a light to a medium light. This one is actually not an ultralight. I don't know if I said ultralight or not, but this one's a light action rod, 7 foot. It works really, really well. So that's one thing that I like to use. It's a Shakespeare Micro Series, probably one of my most favorite rods from Shakespeare. I'm not a big fan of their products, but this rod I'm a big fan of. I really like this rod for crappie fishing and trout fishing, but I definitely recommend this rod for crappie fishing. 7 foot, light, Micro Series Shakespeare rod. Moving on to the line, I'd say anywhere from 4 to 6 pound test. On here I have 8 pound test, but that's because I've been using this reel for bass fishing as well. So I wouldn't go 8 pound test. I usually stick with 4 or 6 pound test. Eventually I'm going to switch this to either 4 or 6 pound test, depending on where I decide to go on that line route. There's pros and cons. Like, the good thing about using a lighter line is it's more sensitive and you can feel the bite better. The bad side about using line is it's going to be a little bit harder to fish in brush where those crappie like to hang out. So you want a little bit stronger line for that. That's why I'd probably go to 6 pound test. Talking about 6 pound test now, the good thing is you can fish a little bit more of structure and inside of trees and stuff like that, just in case they kind of wrap you around. Don't go 8 pound test. Even though I have it on my crappie and trout rod, don't go 8 pound test. It's just I've been using this reel for bass fishing, so I like 8 pound test for some bass fishing. So don't use 8 pound test. I'm gonna have to switch this out here pretty soon. Moving on to the reel, I really don't know, to be honest. There's really no gear ratio for reel. This is a Daiwa, I don't know what that is, RG200HAB or something like that. It doesn't really have a name, to be honest. But the reel doesn't really matter. You want to use something small. This isn't like the biggest reel you can find. it's kind of a decent size. I'm not really good with spinning rod sizes, so I can't really tell you that, to be honest. I'm sorry about that, but you don't want to use something really big, because you don't really need a big reel for crappie fishing, to be honest. Gear ratio doesn't matter. I think this one, let me check the gear ratio for this one. Gear ratio is a 5:6 to 1, but to be honest, gear ratio doesn't play a big role into it. Just make sure that you have a line anywhere from 4 to 6 pound test, and that you have ultralight, a light, or a medium light rod. Those are probably the best rods to use for crappie fishing. They're not overkill. I wouldn't go anything above a medium light rod. So stay anywhere from light to a medium light rod, and I think it's probably some of the best actions for crappies in rods. Also, you can go from a 6'6" rod to a 7-foot rod. I like to use 7-foot rods. That's just my preference and how I like to fish crappie. So that's all I'm gonna have for you today. Thank you for watching this video. Make sure to give this video a like, and if you would want to get further notifications on when I'm going to be posting a video, or I'm going to be posting a specific type of video, or if you'd like to recommend a specific video to me, make sure to follow me on my Instagram, which is down below, link down below. I'll probably have it pop up right here again, like all the other times. If you haven't subbed, or not subbed, but followed me on Instagram already, make sure to go ahead and do that. Turn on the little bell notification deal right next to subscribe. So go ahead and do that, so that way you're notified on when my next video is. Anyways guys, this is 806 Anglers. If you're new, please subscribe, hit the bell notification, like this video, leave a comment, and we'll see you on the next one. Tight lines, guys.